lots of perspective now from MSNBC political analyst Michael Steele, former chair of the Republican National Committee. Also with us, MSNBC presidential historian Michael Beschloss as well. Two Michaels, so I'll have to use your first and last names here, gentlemen. Mr. Steele, we'll start with you. Our political unit actually put together some examples of the best figures that we have from when President Trump took office compared to now. We'll start with unemployment. Unemployment going from 4.7% to 6.7%. The Dow has climbed from around 19,800 to more than 30,800. The number of Americans living below the poverty level has dropped from 40.6 million in 2016 to 34 million today. The federal budget deficit has jumped from $584 billion in 2016 to some $3.3 trillion in 2020. Michael Steele, President Trump ran on the economy. How would you characterize the state of the economy that he leaves behind?
Well, you know, it's a very mixed conversation when it comes to the economy, because as those statistics show, there are spots that are good and strong where poverty levels are lower and unemployment. We know what the distortion was there with respect to COVID-19. In a non-COVID environment, the unemployment numbers probably would be very, very strong. And it's still it's a mind-boggling moment to sort of sit there and think about the good stuff that the administration could have talked about in this 2020 presidential cycle. They got nowhere close to. They did not create a conversation around those things that were good that could benefit. But it also showed the disparity, the continuing disparities, the imbalance in the economic recovery. Wall Street doing well from 19,000 to 30,000, but that's not necessarily reflected on the streets of Main Street America. And so that's the other Achilles heel that comes out of the mixed messaging of this economic conversation that I thought the president could have tackled head on. But as we all know, that, you know, it wasn't about him. It was about the economy. And so he didn't want to talk about it.
Michael Beschloss, President Trump ending his term on a low note. According to Gallup, the president leaving office with a 34% approval rating, the lowest of his time in office. And that is saying a lot. What do you hope, Michael Beschloss? What do you hope we see from him as he enters this phase of post-presidency?
Repentance and atonement for the terrible job he has done as president. Craig, the worst thing a president of the United States can do is what Donald Trump did in the last couple of weeks. He deliberately incited an insurrection against the United States Congress to overturn a free and fair presidential election and came really close to assassinations and hostage takings that could have fractured our democracy. We've had presidents for over 200 years. I don't know any other president who's done anything as bad as that. And as much as we might say that 400,000 plus Americans have lost their lives to COVID, many of them did not need to die, but for his misleadership, his bad leadership, and the mismanagement of the economy that Michael Steele is talking about, and the fact that racial injustice and systemic racism have had a champion and a friend in the Oval Office for 4 years. Hard for me to see anything good that Donald Trump has done that will outweigh all that.
Michael Steele, in Pennsylvania alone, about 4,100 Republicans have switched their voter registration in just 1 week. That's according to the Secretary of State's office there in Pennsylvania. That, of course, in the wake of the insurrection at the Capitol behind me. NBC's Maura Barrett, she went to Cumberland County, a traditional Republican stronghold, and she talked to a Republican Party official about that specifically. Here's what they said.
The spike was way out of form compared to what we would normally see. There's always a baseline number of folks who are changing parties. This was very attention-getting, and it apparently was not a one-day phenomenon, and it could go on for a while. We have to determine if we're going to remain committed to the historic Republican principles or if the party is going to shift and potentially split.
Michael Steele, I mean, what do you say to that? Where does your party go from here?
I say strap in. That 4,000, voter drop is just the tip of a very, very long, tall iceberg that the party is going to have to contend with. You can one-off that and say it's not a big deal. You can say that that's not indicative of where the party is going to go. It is. When you're losing Republican members and you're left with QAnon and Proud Boys, you've got to reassess whether or not you are even close to being a viable party. And that's going to be a big part of the conversation for the GOP. A lot of us have been warning about it. A lot of us have been trying to jumpstart it so we can have that serious internal discussion. But folks still want to hang with Trump. And so you will literally hang with him because there is no future when you're dropping 4,000 voters in a week. And so that's just Pennsylvania. And we know how important Pennsylvania is in the presidential electoral season. And that can also spell big problems down ballot when you get into legislative races, et cetera. So there's a lot for the party to consider here.
Two Michaels, not enough time. Michael Steele, Michael Beschloss, a big thanks to both of you on this inauguration eve.
Thanks.